So imagine you've for 3 years been the friend and the apprentice of the man who claimed that he was going to save the world. When one day, suddenly, he is captured, tried, tortured, crucified, and eventually laid in a tomb. You think you remember him saying something about this, but you can't help but wonder, is all hope lost? Jesus had a lot of unique claims. He's the way of salvation, the Son of God, the resurrection, or the rising from the dead. I don't expect you to come into this speech agreeing with all of that. However, I would wonder what you would think of the authority that his claims are given by the historical basis of him rising from the dead. Jesus has changed my life so beautifully. However, I did not want to simply rely on what I believe, but build a strong argument based on historical evidence. My main points are that the letters that were current to the events of the time, written by Paul and Clement, are viable sources. The Bible accounts are also contain features that point to their trustworthiness, and the fact that the rapid spread of Christianity through Europe showed that the disciples really believed what they were talking about. So these two letters that I mentioned by Paul and Clement to the Corinthian church claimed that that Jesus was resurrected, which could have been easily shot down if there were outstanding facts opposed to that at the time. This would be my first point. So these two letters were written 20 and 63 years respectively after the crucifixion of Jesus. Documents that date that close to the events that they describe are much less likely to have been corrupted by myths or exaggeration. Just think about it. If you try to describe in 20 years what COVID-19 was like and your experience with it, and then think about your grandchildren trying to describe the same thing years in the future, there's definitely bound to be a lot that was left out in the latter case. Even the fact that these two documents were letters points to their reliability. The European University Institute Department of History and Civilization published a book in 2004 called Reading, Interpreting, and Historicizing Letters as Historical Sources that said, quote, "Historians have always appreciated letters as valuable sources," end quote. In addition, why would these letters even be preserved if they were starkly opposed to what was known at the time? So now you know why I believe letters are worthy of careful consideration. But let me tell you about 4 other accounts that also need to be looked at. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the first 4 books of the New Testament. Brings me to point number 2. The features of these accounts and the dates of them show that they are primary sources that are worthy of careful consideration as well. In all 4 of the accounts, women are the ones who discover the tomb. Why is this important? Well, think even back to what women's rights were like 200 years ago. Then make it 2,000 years ago in Palestine. The reason that we are able to hold the accounts in our hands today that say that is that the people that wrote these accounts actually cared about relaying the truth and being faithful to what actually happened. That being said, there are small differences between the accounts, which you may think would make them contradictory. But let me tell you why they actually strengthen your argument for them. None of the differences between the accounts actually alter the implications of the message, but they are in details like what exact time of day was it, and was it this Mary or was it that Mary, kind of thing. American analytic philosopher and apologist William Lane Craig claimed in his interview with Lee Strobel in Strobel's 1998 book, The Case for Christ, that, quote, "The differences between the empty tomb narrative suggest that we have multiple independent attestation of the empty tomb story," end quote. But whatever you believe about the reliability of those narratives, you cannot deny the clear spread of the message throughout the area. Point number 3, Jesus's people truly believed what they were talking about. Shortly after Jesus' crucifixion, they spread the message everywhere. In Matthew 10:27, Jesus had told them to yell on the housetops what they'd been told and what had been whispered to them or told in the dark. And it is seen that they urgently obeyed this by just the drastic spread of the message like wildfire through Europe. The apostles, the people of Jesus, clung tightly to this message while enduring much suffering. Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus said in his 116 work Annals, chapter 44, that, quote, "Those who confessed were first seized, then on their information a great multitude were convicted, as of hatred of the human race." He also goes on to describe how they were tragically torn apart or burned or hung. The fourth bishop of Rome, Clement, whom I mentioned earlier, wrote in that letter that I mentioned, 96 AD, his letter to the Corinthians, that Jesus's people, even many of them, were tortured and killed for their faith. So now that I've dived into the historical basis for these accounts and these events, let me recap. Or what they had, the strength with which they carried the message. Point number 1. The 2 letters of Paul and Clement, which claim the resurrection, must be acknowledged as primary sources. Number 2, the narratives from the beginning of the New Testament are candid sources that are worthy of careful consideration. And number 3, Jesus's people were willing to suffer so that they would know that Jesus was alive. I hope that you too, on careful consideration of the evidence, can see that all hope is not lost. Thank you.